Hi YouTube, my name is Thomas. I would like to give you some tips and tricks regarding how to inspect, how to buy and how to maintain a Volkswagen Lupo 3L. It's a quite special car. I have owned this example for more than 6 years. I've done all the maintenance myself. It has been a very stable car for me, and I think it's a very cool car, and there's not that many around anymore, and I really would like to share some tips and tricks on how to maintain it best possible way. Okay, let's start with some facts about the car. It's a very lightweight construction. It weighs only 825 kilos. It has a 1.2 liters diesel engine with a full aluminum construction. It has very lightweight components, making it weighing around 150 kilos less than the 1.7 standard diesel version. It has aluminum hood, aluminum doors, aluminum rear lid, and many other cool components. That is components like the back of the seat is made of a aluminum construction, and the gear lever is in magnesium, and the same with the steering wheel. The rear brake drums are also made of magnesium. The rear lid here is made of aluminum, and you can hear it has a special sound. All the windows are thinner compared to the regular Lupo ones, making them more lightweight. If you want to read more about fun facts and details about the car and its construction, there exist two documents that you can Google. It's called SSP, Self-Study Program. There is, I think, one for the engine, and there is also one for the entire car and its construction. So let's take an in-depth tour of the car. There is a micro switch in the door handle of the driver's door, so it should sound like this when you open it. You should hear a hum from the hydraulic station that gives hydraulic pressure to the gear box. It should stop quite short time after it runs. It sits right there, and it builds up hydraulic pressure to the gearbox so it can change gear and can say engage the clutch. You should be aware of that the hydraulic system here needs some maintenance. I've done it every time, that's actually every year when I have changed the engine oil. I have made sure to top up with the correct, you can say, hydraulic fluid for the system. And the way that it needs to be done is that you need to disconnect the battery. It's in the boot, by the way. When you don't have power on the station, you make sure that it doesn't suddenly start when you open the door or something like that and builds up pressure when you're working with it. You really don't want that. You turn this one, I think 2.5 times up, and then you can open the lid, and then you want to check that you can say the fluid is somewhere in between here in this small window where you can check. And if it's not, you need to top up with the liquid. I really recommend to be over it, especially when the car has some years, the car is some years old, because that's one of the sources for a malfunctioning gear. I've seen people reporting that gears suddenly would not change and it suddenly doesn't work when you were driving. I've never experienced so, and I've simply just topped up with the liquid. You should also be aware that this one is somehow a pressure reservoir, and it needs to have some changes or needs to be changed a couple of times during its lifespan. It's not easy to say when exactly it needs to be replaced, but when you can hear the hydraulic pump is running too much and too frequent and for too long time, you heard it before, you should certainly be aware that it's something that takes hard on the hydraulic station. Unfortunately, with these cars, some of the components are not really available anymore. So it means that you need to look aftermarket and see if you can find some kind of replacements for these. just popped off the engine cover, as you can see here. This is a vacuum pump. The oil filter sits there, and you can see down here, this car don't have any power steering, or it doesn't have air conditioning. The generator sits down there, and one thing that I have changed in the 6 or more years that I've had the car is the freewheel or the freewheel clutch on the generator. And the reason for that is that a 3-cylinder diesel engine has some imbalance, and it means that it needs some kind of freewheel, so it only can engage in one direction when it turns. It makes some very weird rattling noise when that one breaks. It requires some special tools. They are easily available on Amazon or similar. Then you need to be aware of the timing belt. It's luckily not a timing chain on these. It's a timing belt. It's quiet. I mean, it's not easy, but it's a simple job to exchange it. And it's typically to be exchanged every 90,000 kilometers. There's another thing we can look at now. We are looking at the engine compartment here is the diesel filter. It's a fuel filter, as you can see here. It's, you can say, a regular diesel fuel filter. Needs to be changed with a certain interval. It has a return valve here. And that return valve can make also a fun noise if it doesn't work. I've changed it a couple of times in the years that I've had the car. You actually need, when you exchange the diesel filter, you need to have a vacuum cable so you can engage the diesel pump so it can fill up the filter. However, there is a trick. You can actually do that without having the cable. I have done that before. And that is by when you take the new filter, fill up the new filter with some kind of a bottle of diesel, so it's more or less filled up. Exchange the filter, put it in, put on the, you can say, the fuel lines, and then turn on the ignition a couple of times so you can hear the diesel pump is filling up the rest of the filter, and that has actually turned out to work well. There is a way where you can check if you have vacuum, the air mass measurement sensor, but I will put that in a link how to do that. So this is how the engine compartment looks like. It's fairly simple, I will say, and yeah. Maybe one last thing that I can show you, and that is the turbo on this car has a variable geometry, and that means that it has a vacuum, somehow a vacuum device that can change the geometry of the turbo. What you want to check is that this one moves freely like this one does. I was just about to forget one thing that actually frequently break on these. I said frequently, I'm not really sure how frequent it is, but I've read about several others who have had that problem. And I've actually changed that myself here. You can see this one seems fairly new. And that's actually the wiper motor mechanism. It's not the wiper motor itself, because you can change, you can actually keep that one, but the mechanism that connects the two wiper arms, it has some kind of a plastic bushing under here, and that typically is going to wear down, and that means that it pops, the arm pops out, and then the second wiper arm will just stay down. So only that wiper arms will run. It's fairly easy to buy this. You can get it, you can see I got this from Volkswagen themselves as original spare part. But I think you can actually get that as an aftermarket spare part as well. It's fairly easy to disassemble it. You can say take the motor, put it on the new mechanism, and then put it back in. So, let's race the car. Let's start with the front of the car, let's have a look at the front suspension here. Something that I would like to show you here. So looking at the lower control arm, you can see here it's made of aluminum. It's in a one piece, and it means that it has pushed in bushings, and also the lower ball joint is, you can say, one piece with the control arm, meaning that you cannot exchange that only. And that also means that you really want to make sure that this, you can say, this rubber boot here is in good condition, and make sure that it doesn't have cracks and similar. And you can actually change that one. And I've done that on this car some years ago. You can take actually, or you can buy a steering ball joint. Not fully sure what it's called in English, but let's call it a steering ball joint, and take off the rubber boot from that one. I bought one from Lemfurter, a very good quality brand, and then I exchanged it with this one. Of course, it comes with some work because you have to pop up or pop off this connection here, but it is certainly worth it, I will say. Then other things that you should observe is that often and that actually goes for both the front and the rear springs, are not that a thick construction. And that means that they typically breaks in the lower part of it here. And you can see this one is one that I've changed not that long time ago. The damper, front damper, is made of full aluminum, and as far as I know, you cannot get those as aftermarket ones. So let's have a look in here, and of course regular things like for the constant velocity axle here, or the joint here, you also want to check that boot is not having cracks or anything like that. But I'm more or less diving into the details of what is specifically to know by having and inspecting this type of car, especially this Lupo here. I'll take off the lower engine cover so we can have a closer look of what is behind it. Out the lower engine cover, you can see the engine and the gearbox. The engine here is absolutely dry. It consumes no oil at all and consumes no water at all. It has now 248,000 kilometers and is performing absolutely fine. I used to change the oil every 15,000 kilometers, so I don't go for the long life service intervals of 30,000 kilometers. I simply believe that it's a better approach, and the oil is not expensive, and it doesn't consume, it doesn't, the volume of the engine oil is not too bad on these. You can see here on the gearbox and the gear change mechanism that it is quite wet down here. It means that it spills some of the hydraulic fluid. It is very common on these that the gear changing mechanism, and also that you can say the hydraulic fluid sump on the hydraulic pump that we saw before, that it somehow have some micro cracks and it leaks a little. I will say this is something that doesn't drip on the ground. I can see, and I've watched and make sure that it's not something that is leaking to that extent. But that is one of the reasons that why I really recommend always to top up the hydraulic fluids on these. I have seen very few that has been fully dry, and that's something that comes over the years. So please maintain and top up the hydraulic fluids on these ones. Another thing that I really would like to show you, and one thing that I would like to recommend, is the roller joints. The roller joints here are a special type. It's called a triple roller joint, and in there are some small rollers. They are turning around in this small housing, as you can see in here, and it's very important that there is the correct amount of grease in those. And what happens over time is typically that somehow water leaks into, you can say it's to the housing here and through the boot, and somehow mixes up the grease. I have over time, one time I've changed with the correct grease for these triple roller joints here, and I've done that of course on both sides. You can see the other one over there, but it definitely you can say changed the comfort of driving the car, and it went with less noise, I will say, in the transmission. So that's definitely something that I will recommend. I did it as you can say a preventive maintenance because I've read about it, and I just really want to make sure that they were in good condition. And when I opened, I was actually surprised to see the condition of the fat, the grease in there, because it was actually, I mean, totally mixed with water. So I must say, in this case here, it was absolutely right, and I'm glad that I changed it. There has been a lot of talk about the gearboxes on these, and I can read that gearboxes on many of the cars have been changed several times during its lifespan. For this car, with 280,000 kilometers, it's still original gearbox. What I've done is that I have frequently changed the gear oil. You may ask yourself, what is frequent changes? I simply cannot advise on how frequent it should be done. But if you ask me, I would say something around 60,000 kilometers. It has a specification of a very low capacity. If you look up into the actual numbers, it actually states that it's a lifelong, you can say, gearbox oil, so it's actually not supposed to be changed. However, I will highly recommend doing it. What you should be aware of is that with this low capacity, it is actually, and it has shown something that I've read several people writing about on the internet, is that increasing or filling in more oil, similar to what is in the gearbox of a Volkswagen Polo, gives much better performance. And that's what I do on this one. So I drain it from that hole there, and then I fill it up from the gearbox speed sensor. On top of the gearbox, actually pull out the gearbox speed sensor. It's an electronic sensor, and then fill it up there with the correct capacity. I will write in the notes to this video what the recommended capacity is, and I must say that it has worked for me so far. I've not, knock on wood, have any issues with this gearbox at all. It just runs very, very smooth. We could also look into some of the mechanisms in here for changing gears. Some of these have some play in it, but I think this one is in quite good condition. You really want to check that these axles are not having too much play in it, because they need to be exchanged if they do. It's recommended for every 30,000 kilometers in these to make a adjustment of the gearbox by connecting a vacuum cable. And I highly recommend doing that. So yeah, you need to have a cable in order to do that, or know somebody who has a cable to do it. With that cable, you can also adjust the creep point and the adjustment point of the clutch. That is done with the cable, looking at some measuring blocks with the cable and on the computer, and then you adjust the clutch cable on top that we saw before. I can also shortly point you to that. Let's have a look at the back here on the car. So you can see down here that I've also changed the springs here. A lot of people rebuild these magnesium alloy brake drums. to brake drums that are typically from other cars. Can be Volkswagen Golfs or Polos, simply because the spare parts are cheaper. Both the brake pads and the brake drums are cheaper to exchange. However, I would not recommend doing that because these magnesium alloy drums, they have inserts of some hardened steel, meaning that the surface of the hardened steel is very harsh on the brake pads, but you need to find some brake pads that works well with this type of drum. Some people have reported that brake pads from Biltema works well. I have found a model from TRW in Germany that works really, really well. I've also tried with ATE, that it's a premium brand that I usually use for other brake discs and brake pads, etc. But actually the brake pads from ATE didn't, you can say, work that well on mine, unfortunately. So, but TRW is just as good, I will say. What you can see back here is on the rear axle, this beam here is prone to rust, and it is out of production, and it means that you cannot get it anymore. You need to source it elsewhere. I have seen people source it from Seats or other similar cars that shares more or less the same chassis, but it's quite a rework to do it. So this is how it looks. You can see I've never changed the exhaust here. It's in quite good quality, I will say, maybe some high quality steel or something like that, because I rarely have read about people who actually change these. What I will recommend is every time that you change the brake pads on these, also change the handbrake cables. You can see them here. They are very cheap, actually, even though that you pick some quality brand that I typically do here. But they wear in the end, so it is not easy to retract them, and it as far as I believe, it means that it quickly wears down the brake pads on them. So what I do is typically I change the brake pads. I've never changed the brake drums on this car in particular. I've changed the, you can say, the specification of the drum and measured that it still measures within the value. But I've changed the brake pads several times and changed the handbrake cables. And the adjustment of the handbrake cable is done inside of the car where the handbrake lever is. Let's bring the car down again. You can have a look inside of the car here. What you really would like to check when you buy this car or this type of car is that it can start, that the engine can start when the gear lever is in the stop position. So like this, engage the brake, just like you usually do. You can hear the pump. It needs to build up pressure before it can start. Like this, and it is in the stop position. So this is how it's supposed to work. So when you put it down here, the engine will stop. And the reason for why it's important that it can start in this stop position is that the clutch is running in some kind of a guide, have some kind of a guide sleeve. And typically, if that guide sleeve is worn down or is somehow damaged, the car can simply not start in that position. You need to put it somewhere else. I've never tried it, but I've read a lot about it, and it's something I think to be aware of, because it's actually quite a major work to change the clutch and and repair that on the car so it works well. It's quite a smooth place to be, I would say. It's of course a lightweight car, so it doesn't have that many features. It's manual windows, manual mirrors, but it works okay. The winders for the windows, they tend to break. They are plastic, and I've seen them break a couple of times, and I've actually changed one of mine in the driver door side here. But other things that you could check for is also rattling noises around. That can be from these door cards or similar. So yeah, this is how it looks. And as the final thing, I just want to show you how and where you adjust the creep point of the clutch. You can only do it if you have a VACCOM cable or a data cable, because you need to do some adjustments to this you can say this hydraulic clutch engagement mechanism here, and the nuts that are here in this cable have to be within a certain value, but you can read a lot of around that on the internet. It's something that's worth checking with the cable frequently, I will say, so it is within the values. But I must say it's not something that have caused me trouble, at least with this car. So that was my first YouTube video, and I have to share with you that I have really enjoyed owning this car. I think it's a lot of fun to drive in the way that it's very economic. It's of course not a performance car, but you can say performance could be being a very fuel efficient, and this certainly is. I really hope that this tour around the car is something that you can use in the maintenance of your car, and I really hope that we can keep these cars going, because they are certainly worth it. Enjoy! Haha, I forgot to show you this little hack. Most people probably know, but I just want to share it. Behind this, there is a trick where you can actually fill more diesel in the fuel tank than usual. By, you can see this small lever here, by pushing this. So when you put in the tube for filling up diesel, you can actually push this one while you fill it up, and then it allows you to fill around 10 more liters into the fuel tank. That's a fun little hack.